Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and we're looking at balanced druids because balanced druids have received some crazy amount of changes in the last build. There's been some crazy amount of hype about balanced druids because balanced druids in alpha and early beta felt extremely slow, and there's been so much feedback towards balanced druids and how slow they felt that Blizzard has basically reworked a lot of their spells. It reworked a lot of spells in alpha and early beta. Biggest concern in terms of balanced druids is how slow they felt, how slow the casting was, how slow astral power generation was. You basically would do a heroic dungeon and you would go into a mob, and like the mob will be long dead before you could actually generate that 40 or 50 astral power in order to put your starfall, if you want to put your star surge or whatever. So the gameplay was all like, I'm gonna put my dots, I'm gonna use my fillers, and oops, mobs are dead because it takes me so long to get that astral power. So all of these concerns, the whole community was like, it's just too damn slow. And Blizzard, what they did basically, they just attached haste and astral power generators or astral power initial generation to nearly every single cooldown, to your core abilities. They've been made faster, there's been haste buffs, there's been haste talents. They just basically said, you want it fast? We're gonna give you fast. And you'll see the amount of core abilities have been changed. You'll see the amount of core talents have been changed. There's been so many core talents swapped around, which I actually wasn't aware of. I didn't think that they're going to change so many different talents for balanced druids. And the biggest thing that we have to talk about, first of all, but the biggest changes that happened is to do with your Solar Rat, Lunar Strike, and Empowerment. So first of all, your empowerments have been changed. So right now, Lunar Empowerment increases damage of your next Lunar Strike by 70% and reduces the cast time by 15%. Again, that haste attachment to your core abilities. Solar Empowerment causes your next Solar Rat to explode for an additional 35% of its damage to all nearby enemies. So this has been completely changed up and reduces the cast time by 15%. Again, I mentioned haste attached to your core abilities. Your empowerments, which are your big part of your DPS, usually, at least in Legion, you'll make sure to use up all your empowerments. You don't want them to reach 3, because when you reach 3, you might, get an additional one and you lose an empowerment. So you had this kind of deal as a balanced druid. Don't overwrite your solar empowerments. Don't go over your astral power resources. Don't try to lose them and things like that. So that was your basics for playing a Boomkin in Legion, and it seems like it's going to be like that in BfA as well, especially the fact that Eclipse has been introduced. And Eclipse is a new kind of RNG talent, or at least passive. So Lunar Strike has 20% chance to grant you solar empowerment. So your Lunar Strike grants you an opposite empowerment, and your Solar Rat grants you an lunar empowerment. So it's a bit of opposites. And it's 20%. I haven't checked whether it's using a deck system or whether it's completely RNG, but the fact is, if I'm casting Solar Rat, there's a chance that I might get Lunar Empowerment, and all of a sudden I'll cast Lunar Empowerment. Lunar Empowerment, of course, is going to get increased damage, and the duration, or at least the cast time, is going to be reduced by 15%. So all of a sudden you see this, you have this RNG element to balanced druids, and RNG was legitimately missing in early beta. It was missing. There was no kind of procs that you looked out for. Right now they introduced this proc, and I mentioned this before, procs and proc talents, proc spells or whatever are way more fun for DPS classes than it is for healers. As a DPS, you'll try to DPS, or your DPS uptime, you'll try to maintain 100% of uptime. You'll try to DPS the boss or mobs all of the time. So procs will be noticed and procs will be appreciated, and they'll increase the damage and it'll be more fun, and it's something different because you don't expect it. So I'm not against procs. I'm not against procs, and it's actually something interesting because you'll be using a Solar Rat and all of a sudden you get Lunar Empowerment, and you're like, okay, this is gonna increase my damage, there's a lot of mobs around, fun. I consider this relatively fun, and it's a relatively easy change for them to make, and it has a deep impact to balanced druid game style, because Lunar and Solar Rat are like your bread and butter as a balanced druid. So besides these changes, there's been a lot of tinkering, there's been a lot of changes in terms of the range. Like they changed the Sunfire. In early beta it was 5 yards, now it's 8 yards. They actually changed Lunar Strike. It used to be affect, or at least hit the people within the 5 yards, now it's 8 yards, so they simplified it. So now your effects, or your area effects, hit people in a larger Radius, which again, quality of life improvements, and thank God they actually did that because it makes the game a bit more fun as well. So besides that, talents, and there has been a lot of talent changes. As I said at the very start, Blizzard said, we're gonna make it faster, we're gonna add a lot of Astral power generators. So you can see Warrior of Elune generates 40% additional Astral power. Force of Nature generates 15 Astral power over 10 seconds. Fury of Elune generates 40 Astral power over its duration. Your Incarnation, your Celestial Alignment give you 15% haste, or at least a specific amount of haste. They have reduced the damage of the cooldown, but they even introduced the haste, basically, bonus to it. So with more haste, more Astral power, with more Astral power, more fun spells or abilities to use. So you can see where Blizzard is going with this completely. Now, it's actually interesting to see how the tier 15 has changed. The only real new talent has been introduced, because you'll see that Star-Lord is basically your tier 20. Star Search and Starfall grants you 3% haste for 15 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. Stacks, and gaining stacks does not refresh the duration. So this is basically tier 20 for Balanced Druids, and the playstyle was you basically want to stack as much or get as much Astral power and make sure to use your Star Soldier Starfalls as soon as possible in order to get that haste. You know, to get those 3 stacks of haste. So you can, you know, DPS as fast as you can. So that was in the game for the whole time. In the same aspect, the Twin Moons. So there's been Twin Moons. Moonfire deals 20% increased damage and also hits nearby enemy targets. That's your Legendary Shoulders. So Legendary Shoulders in your tier 20 4 set has been added as talents for BfA. It's interesting, and we'll talk about that later on, but legitimately the newest talent that's been introduced is Nature's Balance. And Nature's Balance used to be in tier 100. It used to be a pretty, not a well-picked talent. It used to be mainly for single target, but it was so boring that no one, and it was kind of weak that no one ended up using it. Even for pure single target, people used to go with Stellar Drift, because Stellar Drift allowed you to cast on the move within your Starfall, and movement used to be a big enemy of Balanced Druid. So being able to cast within Starfall was even the best way to play, even for single target fights. So you can see that why Blizzard has changed Nature's Balance, because it was never used. So the only thing that's the same is the name. Besides that, while in combat you generate 2 Astral power every 3 seconds. Okay, it's pretty generic. And while out of combat, your Astral power rebalances to 50 instead of depleting to empty. So this is a talent. I feel it's a talent that was aimed mainly at 5-man dungeons, because in 5-man dungeons, when you're doing, like, let's say you're killing a first mob and you know that there's going to be 20 mobs that you have to pull in the next pull. So you make sure to get as much Astral power as possible, because you know you want to make sure you're going to put your Starfall down as one of the first things you do. You put your Starfall and you start to really DPS. Now, if you don't have Astral power, you will have to you have to use your fillers. Those might take a little time, and all of a sudden the mobs might die and you look bad on the meters. And a lot of people actually used to pull. So this kind of thing is preventing you, or does not want you to pull. It's kind of making quality of life easier, because you don't have to pull. You can make sure you can spend all your Astral power, or at least your Astral power will rebalance. It has been working really weirdly. Like, there's been some bugs that I've encountered, because in a lot of the dungeons in BfA, you stay in combat for unreasonable amounts of time, because maybe there's a mob that's bugged like at the very start of the dungeon, and all of a sudden you're in combat for the whole of dungeon and you can't really test this properly. So I was not running with Nature's Balance for a lot of the dungeons, because they were just too damn buggy. I was in combat for most of the time. Sometimes, like, the whole dungeon will be, you're in combat, the healer can't drink, and all of that thing. But I can see what Blizzard was trying to do. Blizzard wants you to have enough Astral resources for basically every single pull. Blizzard wants your gameplay to be more interesting, because you can straight away go with Starfall, you can straight away go with dotting up and using your fillers, and then again Starfall if you need it, and things like that. So besides that, you also have Warrior of Elune, which right now feels a little bit too strong. I don't know, we'll have to see. I'm not going to be talking about the numbers all of the time, because Balanced Druids have been changed a lot, and I am expecting that this is probably not even the complete talent list. They're probably going to rework some of these talents, maybe move them around, so we're not going to be looking at the exact numbers, but it feels quite strong. Your Lunar Strikes will generate 40% additional Astral power. You just have 3 instant Lunar Strikes, and straight away you can put in like your Starfall or whatever. So, and it's only a 45-second cooldown, it's really not that long. So now let's look at tier 75, and tier 75 is quite interesting. So you have the Soul of the Forest, which has been buffed and nerfed. So aka increases damage bonus from Lunar and Solar empowerments is 30%. It used to be 20%. So straight away, your Lunar and Solar, which is basically, let's say, your single target, even though Lunar and Solar empowerments have kind of like an area of effect attached to them. But let's say they're single target / AoE talent for some example. And you can also notice that it reduces the astral power cost of Starfall. So this talent is great for single target and AoE as well. So that's what I meant at the start of the video when I said there's not a lot of differentiation between pure single target talents and pure AoE talents. A lot of the balanced druid talents seem to be a bit of AoE increase, a bit of single target increase. Now pick which one you feel is the best. This is what I mean by when I said that. And then you have your Twin Moons, which is your legendary shoulders. Again, this is mainly for large AoE pulls where you don't want to, well, AoE pulls where the mobs will live for a generally long time. You want to make sure your Moonfire is on everyone. You generally probably won't want to use this as a single target. Like, I mean, Blizzard probably doesn't want you to use this for single target. So you can almost look at like, maybe I should choose Incarnation or Solar of the Forest, Soul of the Forest, because, you know, they give you that single target and AoE. You can use Incarnation for single target and AoE. The same with Soul of the Forest. Well, Twin Moons is more of like, you know, an AoE build. It's mainly for AoE build. So then after that you have Star-Lord. So I meant Star-Lord, Star Surge and Starfall. Your single target and your AoE spells give you haste. Again, not a big differentiation between pure single target and pure AoE. Stacks up to 3 times, very much like tier 20, like I mentioned this before. And Stellar Drift, which has been nerfed, increases the Starfall radius by 30% and its damage by 25%. From what I remember, it used to be 50%, so it's like a big nerf to Stellar Drift, and allows you to cast while moving within Starfall's area. Same kind of deal. And then you have Stellar Flare, which still kind of feels underwhelming, but in terms of gameplay, we have to see the numbers. Right now, I'm not looking at the pure numbers. But my assumption in here is what Blizzard is trying to achieve is that Star-Lord, you know, works for single target, works for AoE, gives you haste. Haste is great, makes your gameplay faster, makes your astral power generation faster because you are casting more. And Stellar Drift is a pure AoE talent that lets you cast Starfall. Starfall is more powerful, and the biggest thing is that you're able to move within Starfall's area. So I'm assuming, so this is my assumption, this is nothing theoretical, this is my assumption, is that maybe Blizzard wants you to spec into Stellar Drift if you feel a boss fight requires a lot of movement and you can't stay still. So even though it might be a DPS loss to cast Starfall on a single target, which I'm still not sure, maybe it'll still be worth casting Starfall on single target, because it relatively was. There were moments when it was in Legion, but we have to see. But let's say, even though it's a relatively DPS loss to cast Starfall on single target, but that movement within Starfall is going to generate more DPS because it's such a heavy movement fight. On a fight where you don't need that or if you don't need that, it's not that heavy movement happening, and you want to get that most DPS, and you're going to make sure that, you know, you're stationary, you're positioning right, Star-Lord might be the best talent to use. This is my assumption, what Blizzard maybe thinking when they're creating these two talents and incorporating into the Balanced Druid. So now we're looking at tier 100. Tier 100 again is like the previous tiers as well. It's quite hard to decide which talents are going to be the best for which kind of situation, it feels like it's a team based on the talent choices that Blizzard choose. So you have the Shooting Stars, which used to be in a different tier. Shooting Stars have been nerfed in terms of the astral power generation. So your Moonfire and Sunfire damage over time has 10% chance to cause falling stars, dealing damage and generating astral power. So I was like at the start thinking like, okay, Twin Moons, more Moonfires, more Sunfires, well at least it only increases Moonfires, but more Moonfires will work pretty well with Shooting Stars if there's a lot of mobs as well. Like, I can see the synergy here between these two talents. I'm not sure if that's going to be viable, but I can see the synergy between these two talents right now. Then you have Fury of Loon, which has been changed. It generates your astral power as well. It also follows the target that you use, so it's actually interesting. It's also kind of like an AoE, like you can use it for single target and AoE because it affects the people around it. So all of a sudden you're like, Shooting Stars is an AoE ability that generates astral power. Fury of Loon is like a bigger kind of cooldown that also affects area of mobs, and it generates your astral power if you can use it properly. And all of a sudden then you have New Moon, which again, the recharge rate has been increased a lot, so it's not like your artifact ability in Legion. It takes way longer for it to recharge, but again, it's a single target damage ability that generates a lot of astral power. That astral power can be used to your Starfalls. So again, your single target spell that also helps you to do AoE. So all of a sudden I'm looking at all of these talents, and I'm just it's really hard to wrap my head around which talents are going to be the best for, like, let's say pure single target. 2 target cleave, 4+ target fights. I can already see that when the theory crafting is done and things like that, there might be like, you know, 5 builds that are available for like your single target, your 2 target cleave, your 3 target cleave, your 4 target cleave, your 5 target, your single target fight which has burst AoE, your single target fight which has sustained AoE. There's going, all of a sudden you'll have these. I'm not talking like swapping 1 talent or 2 or 1 talent. We're talking about like swapping like majority of your talents for nearly every single fight, depending on the damage patterns, depending on how many adds is going to be happening and things like that. So unless there is like, you know, unless Star-Lord or something is way too powerful or it's way too overtuned and Star-Lord is going to be used for everything, it's going to be very interesting to see which talents are going to make, you know, the best single target, the best AoE, aka like everything what I said. So whether that's good or bad, I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting to some extent. I think there's going to be a lot of talent swapping happening for each of the fights for Boomkins. I think it's going to be a little more scarier when you look at Mythic Plus balance, because in Mythic Plus you have to choose like 1 talent build that's going to be great for single target and AoE. But then again, Boomkins have quite a few talents that work for single target and AoE. But now all of a sudden you'll be thinking like, maybe there is like more 5+ target packs in this Mythic Plus, so I need that, you know, heavy AoE build. So again, these talents are probably going to change a lot. This is not a final build. I can almost guarantee you the Blizzard is going to change the talents, the spell mechanics, not mechanics, the numbers and things like that. There's going to be a lot of tuning done. But again, these changes overall, I know this has been a long video, but overall, any changes are welcome to Balance Druids, because what they were in Alpha and early Beta was just so bad, and there's no way I would have played a Balance Druid if they didn't change it. These changes are quite interesting, a lot of haste, a lot of Astral power, resource generation and things like that, so it makes the gameplay more fun and more engaging. There's some sort of RNG element to this, which again, like I mentioned, RNG is way more fun for DPS, at least I feel is way more fun for DPS. So all of a sudden you have this kind of interesting game style, you have a abundance of talents to choose from, which I'm still very confused about which is going to be the best, because I'm not looking at numbers, I'm looking at practicality or what Blizzard was thinking when they were introducing them. I'm not looking at the numbers right now, so that's a big disclaimer as well. So it'll be very interesting. I'm quite positive about these changes. I'm happy. It made the gameplay much more fun, it's much more faster, and this is what I wanted. I'm sure there's a couple of talents that could be changed and things like that. Of course, it's never perfect, because people always have their own opinions about what is perfect for them. But I feel it's a good step forward, and I feel if this is going to be the live build of Balanced Druids, I will be relatively happy. Tell me what you think about these changes. Tell me what you think if you have the beta and you have played Balanced Druids, if you've done some dungeons. Tell me how you feel about them, whether you like it, whether you hate it, what changes you would want them to implement next. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next guide.